You know what nobody tells you about inheriting a house? The paperwork, the guilt, the way you find yourself standing in the kitchen at midnight eating crackers over the sink because you can't decide if you should sell it or keep it or burn it down for the insurance money. I'm kidding. I would never. Please don't put me on a list. But seriously, you inherit a house from your daddy, and suddenly everyone's got an opinion. Your cousin thinks you should rent it out. Your neighbor thinks you should bulldoze it and build condos. Your therapist thinks you should sit with your grief, which, okay, Janet, but sitting doesn't pay property taxes. And then some guy shows up with a clipboard and tells you your dead father's house is a fire hazard and you've got 3 days to fix it or they're going to take it from you. That's where we're starting today. Sedona, Arizona. A woman named Elena. A house full of memories. And a man in a polo shirt who smiles like he's selling you a timeshare in hell. Oh, and there's a homeless man who drives away in a luxury car. Yeah, I know. I know. Let's get into it.
Ma'am, you've got 72 hours. Elena Vega stood in her own driveway, dust still settling on her boots from the night's stargazing tour, and stared at the fluorescent orange tag zip-tied to her gate like a parking ticket from hell. Abate now. Fire risk. Section 4.7.3. The man holding the clipboard had the kind of smile that looked rehearsed in a bathroom mirror. Clean polo. Pressed khakis. Hair that didn't move even though the desert wind was kicking up sand like it had a personal grudge. I'm sorry, who are you? Garrett Hale. Hazard Compliance Solutions. He handed her a business card with a logo that looked like a flame wearing a hard hat. We're contracted with the county to identify high-risk properties before fire season hits. And your property, Ms. Vega, has been flagged. Elena looked at her house. The same house her father had bought 31 years ago. The same porch where he'd taught her to find Orion's belt. The same windows she'd pressed her face against as a kid, waiting for him to come home from his surveying jobs. Flagged for what? Debris accumulation. Overgrown vegetation. Potential ignition points. He pointed at her side yard. Those palm fronds. That's basically kindling with ambition. Those palm fronds have been there for 6 months. Which is why we're here now. He clicked his pen. The sound was somehow aggressive. Look, I'm not the enemy. I'm trying to help you avoid fines. Liens. Worse. Worse. If a property is flagged as non-compliant and unoccupied, it can be escalated to condemnation proceedings. He said it like he was reading her a bedtime story. Soft. Concerned. Completely fake. You don't want that. Elena felt her stomach drop. I live here. Do you? He glanced at his tablet. Our records show inconsistent occupancy. Utility usage is low. No registered vehicle. You've been out of state twice this year. For work. I run stargazing tours. I travel. Totally understandable. He smiled again. All teeth. But the system doesn't care about context, Ms. Vega. It cares about checkboxes. She wanted to rip that clipboard out of his hands and throw it into the red rocks. So what do I do? Clear the debris. Install fire-resistant landscaping. Submit a compliance report within 72 hours. He paused. Or, if the process feels overwhelming, I do know some buyers who specialize in properties with complicated histories. Quick close. Cash. No inspections. There it was. The real pitch. Elena took a breath. I'll handle the debris. Great. He tucked his pen into his pocket. I'll be back Thursday for the recheck. And Ms. Vega? He lowered his sunglasses just enough to make eye contact. I really am trying to help. He walked back to his truck, a white pickup with the Hazard Compliance Solutions logo on the door, and drove off like he hadn't just threatened to take her childhood home. Elena stood there for a long moment, the tag flapping in the wind. The grocery store parking lot was mostly empty at 9 p.m. Elena had come for garbage bags and work gloves. She'd left with a cart full of landscape fabric, gravel samples, and a headache that wouldn't quit. She was loading the bags into her trunk when she saw him. A man sat behind the store, near the dumpsters, hunched over a bicycle with a busted front light. His clothes were worn but clean. His hands moved with patience, wrapping electrical tape around exposed wires like he was performing surgery. Elena hesitated. She'd lived in Sedona long enough to know the unspoken rules. Don't engage. Don't encourage. Don't make eye contact. But something about the way he worked, calm, focused, completely unhurried, made her pause. You want some food? He looked up. His face was weathered, sun-lined, maybe late 50s. His eyes were sharp. No, thank you. Water. A pause. Then a small nod. She grabbed a bottle from her trunk and walked over, setting it on the asphalt a respectful distance away. Thank you, he said. His voice was quiet. Steady. That light's not going to hold. It'll hold long enough. He tested the switch. A weak glow flickered on. Most things do. Elena almost smiled. I'm Elena. I know. He didn't look up. You're the one with the telescopes. You've seen my tours? I've seen your house. He tightened the tape one more time. You've got a palm frond pile on your east side that's going to catch the next dry gust and roll straight into your neighbor's fence. If anyone with a clipboard sees that, you're going to have bigger problems than a 72-hour notice. Elena blinked. How do you? I walk a lot. He finally looked at her. And I noticed things. He picked up his bike, tucked the water bottle into a side pouch, and started walking toward the road. Wait, she called. What's your name? He paused. Thomas. And then he was gone. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind rattle her windows. The orange tag was still on her gate. The palm fronds were still in her yard. And somewhere out there, a man named Thomas knew more about her property violations than she did. At 2 a.m., she got up and walked to the window. The wind had picked up. Red flag conditions. The kind of night where one spark could eat a whole hillside. And there, at the edge of her fence line, stood Thomas. He wasn't doing anything, just watching, waiting. When he saw her at the window, he pointed toward her side yard. She looked. The palm frond pile had shifted in the wind, now pressed against her wooden fence like a dare. Thomas gave her a single nod, then disappeared into the dark. Elena grabbed her work gloves. She didn't sleep until the pile was gone.
Okay. So, first of all, Garrett Hale? That man walked onto her property like he owned it. Which, spoiler, he's trying to. The I know some buyers line? Baby, that's not a favor. That's a vulture circling a limping deer and calling it friendship. But Thomas, the man behind the grocery store who fixes bike lights and knows her yard layout like he's studying for a quiz. That's either the most helpful stranger in Arizona or the beginning of a Dateline episode. Jury's still out. And my girl Elena out here at 2 in the morning, hauling palm fronds in her pajamas because a man she met once pointed at her fence. Is that trust? Desperation? Intuition? Honey, sometimes you just know when someone's trying to help you and when someone's trying to help themselves to you. But here's the thing. Next chapter, Garrett comes back. The neighbors start posting on Facebook. And Elena makes a decision that's going to have the whole town calling her crazy. Spoiler, she's not crazy. She's just the only one paying attention.
You moved the fronds. Garrett Hale stood at her gate 3 days later, clipboard in hand, sunglasses pushed up into his hair like he was posing for a catalog. He looked almost disappointed. "You sound surprised," Elena said. She was holding a rake, her hands blistered, her back screaming from 2 nights of hauling debris to the curb. "I'm impressed." He walked the perimeter of her yard, making notes. "Gravel's a nice touch. Fire-resistant. Smart. I read the manual. Most people don't." He stopped near her porch, squinting at the roofline. "You've still got some dry brush near the back fence. And that wooden trellis? It's technically a ladder for flames. That trellis has been there since 1994. Fire doesn't care about nostalgia, Miss Vega." Elena gripped the rake handle so hard her knuckles went white. "So what's the verdict?" Garrett made a show of reviewing his tablet. Scrolling. Tapping. The performance of a man who already knew what he was going to say. "I'm scheduling a follow-up inspection. Formal this time. County oversight. I did everything you asked. You did a lot." He smiled. That same smile. "But the system requires verification, documentation, and given the inconsistent occupancy flags on your file, we need to confirm this property is genuinely inhabited. I sleep here every night." "Do you?" He tilted his head. "Because I've got utility records that say otherwise. Low water usage. Minimal electricity. Either you're living off the grid, or you're barely here. I use well water. I use candles. I run stargazing tours at night and sleep during the day." All very reasonable explanations. He tucked his tablet under his arm. But the system doesn't accept explanations. It accepts proof. Elena felt something cold settle in her chest. What kind of proof? Consistent presence. Witnesses. Someone who can verify you're not just stopping by between trips. He paused. "Or, if that's too complicated, I do still have those buyer contacts. They're very understanding about situations like this." There it was again. The offer that wasn't an offer. "I'll get your proof," Elena said. Garrett nodded, already walking back to his truck. Inspections in 5 days. County assessor, fire marshal, the whole circus. He opened his door and paused. "Oh, and Ms. Vega? Whatever you're planning, make sure it's legal. Because I promise you, I'll be checking." He drove off. Elena stood in her driveway, holding a rake, watching the dust settle. The neighborhood Facebook group exploded at 4:47 p.m. Elena didn't see it until her friend Rosa called, breathless. Girl, what is happening? What are you talking about? Check the group. Right now." Elena opened her phone. The post was from Darlene Hutchins, 2 houses down, perpetually suspicious, the kind of woman who called the HOA about lawn height and considered it community service. Just saw a homeless man lurking near Elena Vega's property. Took pictures. Should we be concerned? Tagging Sedona PD just in case. The photo was grainy. Thomas, standing near her fence, looking at something in the distance. The comments were worse. "Isn't she the one with the fire hazard tags? I heard she's never home. Maybe she's running some kind of operation. Should we report this?" Elena felt sick. She scrolled down. 47 comments. People she'd known for years, speculating about her life like it was a true crime podcast. And then she saw it. A comment from Garrett Hale. "As a county contractor, I can confirm the property is under review. Appreciate the community's vigilance. Safety first." He'd tagged the fire marshal. Rosa was still talking, but Elena couldn't hear her anymore. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a setup. She found Thomas at the library. He was sitting at a table near the window, reading a book about desert geology, a paper cup of water beside him. He looked up when she approached, but didn't seem surprised. "They're posting about you online," Elena said, sitting down across from him. I know. They're calling you dangerous. I know that too. Doesn't that bother you? Thomas closed his book. His hands were still. His eyes were calm. People see what they want to see. I stopped fighting that a long time ago. Elena leaned forward. They're using you to get to me. The contractor, Garrett, he's trying to prove I don't really live there. That the house is vacant. If he can do that, he can escalate the process and push me out. And then he buys it cheap. You know about that? I told you. Thomas almost smiled. I noticed things. Elena took a breath. This was insane. This was absolutely insane. But insane was starting to feel like her only option. There's a way to stop him, she said. If someone else has legal standing in the property, occupancy rights, stewardship, something documented, then he can't claim it's vacant. The escalation process stops. Thomas studied her. You're asking me to live in your house. I'm asking you to have legal standing. Temporarily. Just enough to block the condemnation. And you trust me with that? Elena didn't answer right away. She thought about the night he'd appeared at her fence. The way he'd pointed at the palm fronds. The way he'd disappeared without asking for anything in return. I don't know you, she said finally. But I know him. And I know what he's trying to do. So yes, I trust you more than I trust this process. Thomas was quiet for a long moment. There's a land trust clause, he said. Hardship protection. If the property is under documented stewardship, genuine, verified, not just a signature on a form, it can be locked from predatory acquisition. How do you know that? Because I used to work with land trusts. Before. He didn't elaborate on what before meant. If you do this, you need to do it right. Paperwork. Witnesses. A paper trail that can't be questioned. Will you help me? Thomas looked at her for a long time. You understand what this is going to look like. I know. They're already calling you unstable. This will make it worse. I know. He nodded slowly. Then yes. I'll help. The paperwork took 2 days. Rosa notarized it, her hands shaking, her eyes wide. You're giving a homeless man legal standing in your father's house. Temporary stewardship. It's different. Elena. Honey. This is going to be on the news. Let it. Thomas signed his name carefully. His handwriting was neat. Precise. When it was done, Elena made copies. Filed them with the county. Sent registered letters to every office Garrett Hale had ever mentioned. And then she waited. Garrett showed up 2 days before the inspection. He wasn't smiling this time. I heard an interesting rumor, he said, leaning against her fence like he owned it. Something about a new occupant. Not a rumor. It's documented. A homeless man, living in your house. He laughed, but it was sharp. Brittle. You know what that looks like, right? It looks like someone who qualifies as a legal resident. Which means your vacant property claim is dead. Garrett's jaw tightened. You think this is clever? You think a piece of paper is going to stop anything? I think you're scared, Elena said. Because you had a plan, and now it's falling apart. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something expensive, something that didn't belong in the desert. This isn't over, he said quietly. You just made yourself a target. Every neighbor on this street is going to be watching you. Every inspector is going to be looking for a reason. And when they find one, and they will find one, I'm going to be standing right here. He smiled. But this time, there was something else in his eyes. Something that almost looked like admiration. You've got guts, Ms. Vega. I'll give you that. He walked back to his truck. Elena watched him go. Her hands were shaking, but she didn't let him see. That night, Thomas moved into the guest room. He brought one bag, a few books, a small radio that picked up weather reports. Thank you, Elena said, standing in the doorway. Don't thank me yet. He set his bag on the bed. The hard part hasn't started. Outside, the wind was picking up again. Red flag weather. And somewhere in the distance, Elena could swear she heard the rumble of an engine. Watching. Waiting.
Okay. I need everyone to take a breath because I am stressed. This woman who runs stargazing tours and talks to the moon for a living, just signed legal paperwork giving a man she met behind a grocery store partial standing in her dead father's house. And you know what? I respect it. Because here's the thing. Garrett Hale thought he had her cornered. He thought he could flash his clipboard and his county contracts and his I know some buyer's nonsense and she would just crumble. He forgot one thing. Desperate people don't crumble. They improvise. Now, is this plan insane? Yes. Is the whole neighborhood going to lose their minds? Absolutely. Is Darlene Hutchins already drafting a 17-paragraph Facebook post about safety concerns? You know she is. But here's what got me. That moment at the end. When Garrett said you've got guts and looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. That wasn't just anger, baby. That was interest. And interest is dangerous. Because a man who wants to destroy you is predictable. A man who's starting to admire you. That's chaos. Next chapter, the expensive car shows up. And everything Elena thought she understood about Thomas is about to get real complicated. Don't go anywhere.
You're humming. Elena looked up from her coffee. Thomas was standing at the kitchen counter, holding a screwdriver, the back door's loose hinge finally getting the attention it had needed for 3 years. I don't hum. You were humming. Something from the 80s. Couldn't tell what. Elena felt her face warm. Maybe I was. It's a good sign. Thomas tested the hinge. Smooth. Silent. Means you slept. She had slept. For the first time in weeks, she'd slept through the night without waking up to check the windows, without listening for trucks, without running worst-case scenarios until her brain felt like a hamster wheel on fire. The inspection's tomorrow, she said. I know. Garrett's going to be there. I know that too. Elena wrapped her hands around her mug. You're not nervous. Thomas set down the screwdriver and looked at her. His eyes were steady, the way they always were, like he'd already seen the worst the world could offer and decided to keep walking anyway. Nervous doesn't fix hinges, he said. Nervous doesn't clear brush. Nervous just sits in your chest and eats your oxygen. That's very zen of you. That's very practical of me. He almost smiled. You want to be nervous? Go ahead. But maybe wait until after breakfast. Elena laughed. A real laugh. The kind that came from somewhere she'd forgotten existed. Fine. After breakfast. The morning was almost normal. Elena made eggs. Thomas fixed the wobbling leg on her telescope tripod, the one she'd been meaning to deal with for months. They talked about nothing important. The weather, the best trails for night hiking, whether instant coffee was a crime against humanity or just a misdemeanor. Misdemeanor, Thomas said, but a repeat offense. Noted. By 10 o'clock, Elena needed to pick up the fire-safe gravel she'd ordered. 40 bags. Enough to cover the remaining bare patches along her fence line and give the inspectors nothing to complain about. I'll be back in an hour, she said, grabbing her keys. I'll be here. It felt strange, hearing those words. Someone would be here. Someone was waiting. She hadn't realized how much she'd missed that. The gravel pickup took longer than expected. The guy at the landscaping yard wanted to talk about the weather, then about the fire season, then about his cousin who'd lost a house in Flagstaff, and how the insurance company had screwed him over. You gotta be careful with these contractors, he said, loading the last bag into her truck. Some of them are just vultures in khakis. Yeah, Elena said. I've noticed. By the time she pulled back onto her street, it was almost noon, and that's when she saw it. A car. Not just any car. A black Mercedes. S-Class. The kind that cost more than her house was worth. The kind that didn't belong on a dusty Sedona side street, parked in front of her property like it had every right to be there. Elena slowed. Her heart started hammering before her brain caught up. The driver's door opened, and Thomas stepped out. He was wearing the same clothes, the same weather jacket, the same boots that had walked 1,000 desert miles. But he moved differently, straighter, more deliberate. He saw her truck, met her eyes through the windshield, and then he got back in the car and drove away. Elena sat in her driveway for 10 minutes. She didn't move, didn't get out, just stared at the space where the Mercedes had been, trying to make the pieces fit into a shape that made sense. They didn't fit. Thomas, the man who fixed bike lights with electrical tape, the man who slept in a guest room with one bag and a weather radio, the man who knew about land trusts and fire codes and seemed to own nothing but patience. That man had just driven away in a car worth more than she'd make in 5 years. Her phone buzzed. A text from Rosa. Girl. Check the group. Elena's stomach dropped. She opened Facebook. Darlene Hutchins had posted again, this time with a video. Update on the suspicious activity at the Vega property. This morning I witnessed the homeless man get into a luxury vehicle and drive away. Something is not right here. Is she running a scam? Is he? Who is paying for this? The comments were already rolling in. I knew something was off. Call the police. She's either a con artist or an idiot. Maybe both. Elena closed the app. Her hands were shaking. Garrett called an hour later. Interesting development, he said. She could hear the smile in his voice. Word on the street is your new tenant has some expensive taste. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. He paused. Look, Elena. Can I call you Elena? I'm not here to gloat. I'm here to offer you an out. I don't need an out. You need something. Because right now, your credibility is in the toilet. The county assessor is getting calls. The fire marshal is getting emails. Everyone wants to know what's really going on at the Vega property. Elena pressed her palm against her forehead. What do you want, Garrett? Same thing I've always wanted. To help. His voice softened. Warmer. Almost convincing. Drop the stewardship paperwork. Sell me the property. I'll make sure you get fair market value. Better than fair. And this whole thing goes away. And if I don't, then tomorrow's inspection becomes a circus. And circuses have a way of finding clowns, Elena, even when they're not looking. He hung up. Elena stood in her kitchen, phone in hand, staring at the hinge Thomas had fixed that morning. Smooth. Silent. Perfect. Who was he? Thomas didn't come back until dark. Elena was sitting on the porch when she heard footsteps. No headlights. No engine. Just the quiet crunch of boots on gravel. He appeared at the edge of the yard. Same clothes. Same face. Same steady eyes. You saw, he said. I saw. And you have questions. I have a lot of questions. Thomas walked up the porch steps and sat down in the chair beside her. He didn't look at her, just stared out at the desert, at the stars starting to prick through the purple sky. I can't explain everything, he said. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That's not good enough. I know. Elena turned to face him. The whole town thinks I'm running a scam. Garrett is circling like a shark. And tomorrow, I have to stand in front of a county assessor and explain why I gave legal standing to a man who apparently drives a $100,000 car. $87,000. Is that supposed to be funny? Thomas finally looked at her. His expression was unreadable. The car isn't mine. It belongs to the land trust. What? There's a meeting. Once a year. The partners have to appear in person to verify the protection clauses. I had to attend. Today was the only day. Elena stared at him. You're telling me you're part of a land trust. I'm telling you I used to be. Before everything fell apart. He paused. There's a hardship clause that can protect this property, but it requires verification, documentation, a chain of custody that proves the home is being cared for, not exploited. And you being here is part of that chain. Yes. Elena sat back. The pieces still didn't fit, but they were starting to form a different shape. Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed to know you were real first. Thomas looked at her. People like Garrett, they find soft targets. Desperate people. People who'll sign anything to make the pressure stop. I had to be sure you weren't going to fold. And now I know you won't. The wind picked up. A gust rattled the porch light. The inspection's in 12 hours, Elena said. I know. Garrett's going to try something. I know that too. And you're going to be there. Thomas nodded. I'll be there. Elena looked up at the sky. Orion was rising, the belt clear and bright, exactly where it had been when her father first pointed it out to her 30 years ago. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. That night, she didn't sleep. But this time, it wasn't fear keeping her awake. It was something else. Something that felt almost like hope.
I need to sit down. I'm already sitting down, but I need to sit down again. Because this man who showed up with a busted bike light and a water bottle, just rolled up in a Mercedes like he was heading to a board meeting in Monaco. And I'll be honest. For about 5 minutes there, I thought we were in scam territory. I thought Thomas was running the long con. I thought Elena was about to be the lead story on a financial fraud podcast. But then he explained it. Land trust. Annual meeting. Hardship clause. And suddenly it all clicks. Thomas isn't a con man. He's a ghost. He's someone who used to be part of the system, the same system that's trying to eat Elena alive, and he walked away. Or got pushed out. He didn't say which, and honey, that's the most interesting part. What happened to this man? What did he lose? And why is he risking it all for a woman he met behind a grocery store? I don't have answers yet. But I have theories. And my theories usually involve either trauma or love, and sometimes both. Now here's what's killing me. Garrett called. He offered her an out. Fair market value. Walk away clean. And she said no. She said no when her reputation is in shreds. She said no when the whole neighborhood thinks she's lost her mind. She said no when the easy choice was right there, gift-wrapped, with a bow on top. That's not stubbornness, baby. That's conviction. And Garrett? Oh, Garrett felt that. He felt it in his chest. Because a woman who won't break isn't a target anymore. She's a problem. And problems are interesting. Next chapter, the inspection happens. Garrett shows up with cameras and a crew. And something goes wrong, but not the way anyone expects. Stay with me.
The wind woke her up. Elena opened her eyes at 5:47 a.m., the curtains snapping against the window frame like they were trying to escape. Outside, the sky was the color of rust, that ugly orange-brown that meant dust was moving, air was dry, and the fire department was already on edge. Red flag warning. Of course. She grabbed her phone. 3 notifications. The first was from the county. Inspection scheduled for 10 a.m. Please ensure all occupants are present and documentation is available. The second was from Rosa. I'm coming over. You shouldn't face this alone. Also, I'm bringing muffins because stress eating is valid. The third was from an unknown number. Looking forward to today. Gee. Elena stared at that last one. He had her number now. She didn't remember giving it to him. By 9:30, her yard looked like a town square. Darlene Hutchins was stationed across the street with a lawn chair and a thermos, pretending to garden while recording everything on her phone. Two other neighbors had found reasons to be outside. One washing a car that was already clean, another walking a dog that clearly didn't want to be walked. And then there was Garrett. He arrived at 9:45 in a county vehicle this time, not his usual truck. Official. Serious. A camera crew from the local access channel was setting up near the curb, and a woman with a clipboard was talking to someone in a fire marshal jacket. He brought an audience, Thomas said, standing beside her on the porch. He wants a show? Then let's not give him one. Elena looked at Thomas. He was calm. Still, the same steadiness he'd had since the first night she'd met him. How are you not nervous? I told you. Nervous doesn't help. You also told me you'd explain everything eventually. It's eventually. Thomas almost smiled. Survive today. Then we'll talk. The inspection started at exactly 10 o'clock. The fire marshal, a stocky woman named Lieutenant Reyes, walked the property with a tablet, making notes. The county assessor, a thin man with glasses and no personality, followed behind, checking documentation against her files. Garrett stayed near the gate, watching. Elena walked them through every improvement she'd made. The gravel, the cleared brush, the fire-resistant landscaping, the repaired fence, the trimmed trees, the new hose connections. Lieutenant Reyes nodded at each item. Professional. Neutral. And this is Thomas Whitmore? She asked, glancing at the paperwork. The registered co-occupant. Steward, Thomas said. Temporary stewardship under the Hardship Protection Clause. I see that. Reyes looked at him. You're listed as a representative of the Mesa Verde Land Trust. Former representative. The trust dissolved 3 years ago. But the clause remains valid as long as the documentation chain is intact. The assessor frowned. We'll need to verify that. I have the records. Thomas handed over a folder. Original filings, transfer documents, and a notarized affidavit from the trust's last acting director. Elena blinked. She hadn't seen that folder before. The assessor took it, flipping through pages with the enthusiasm of a man who'd rather be anywhere else. This appears to be in order, he said finally. Pending verification. Garrett stepped forward. If I may, he said, his voice smooth. I'd like to note that the stewardship arrangement was filed under unusual circumstances. The timeline suggests it was a reactive measure, not a genuine. Mr. Hale. Lieutenant Reyes didn't look up from her tablet. You're here as a contractor consultant, not as legal counsel. I'm just trying to ensure. You're trying to ensure something, that's clear. She met his eyes. Let's focus on the property. Garrett's jaw tightened, but he stepped back. Elena felt something loosen in her chest. Not victory. Not yet. But maybe the first breath before victory. It happened at 10:47. The inspection was almost over. Lieutenant Reyes was making final notes. The assessor was packing up his files. Even Darlene Hutchins had stopped pretending to garden and was just openly staring from across the street. And then the wind gusted. Hard. A folding table near the camera crew, loaded with equipment, cables, a portable monitor, lifted off the ground and tumbled toward the street. A kid was there, maybe 8 years old, part of a family of tourists who'd wandered over to see what the fuss was about. He was holding a cheap sparkler souvenir, the kind they sold at the gift shops downtown, still in its plastic wrapper. The table clipped him in the shoulder. He stumbled. The sparkler flew out of his hands and landed on a pile of dry leaves near the curb. The leaves caught. Not a big fire. Not yet. But enough flame to make everyone freeze. Except Garrett. Garrett moved. He didn't hesitate, didn't calculate, didn't check to see if anyone was watching. He grabbed the kid, pulled him back, and stomped on the leaves with his dress shoes. Once, twice, 3 times, until the flames were out. Then he picked up the table. Then he turned to the camera crew. "You didn't secure your equipment," he said. His voice was flat, hard, in a red flag zone, with civilians present. "That's a liability issue. You're done here." The crew looked stunned. "But we're filming for the county." "I don't care who you're filming for. Pack up and leave, or I'll file the report myself." They packed up. The kid's mom was crying, thanking him, trying to shake his hand. Garrett waved her off, not rudely, just distantly, like he didn't know what to do with gratitude. Lieutenant Reyes walked over. That was fast thinking. That was basic safety. Garrett looked at the leaves, still smoldering faintly at the edges. The crew should have known better. They should have. She paused. "I'll note your response in my report." "Don't." She raised an eyebrow. "I said don't." He shook his head. "I'm not here to be a hero. I'm here to do my job." He walked back to his vehicle without looking at Elena. But she saw it. The way his hands were shaking. The way he kept his back to the crowd. The way he stood by his truck for a long moment, staring at nothing, before finally getting in and driving away. The inspection ended at 11:15. Lieutenant Reyes handed Elena a yellow form. "Conditional pass," she said. "There are a few minor items to address. Documentation verification, a follow-up in 60 days. But the property is not in violation. The condemnation process has been halted." Elena stared at the paper. "That's it. That's it." Reyes almost smiled. "You did the work, Ms. Vega? Most people don't." She left. The assessor left. The neighbors drifted away, disappointed that there was no drama to report. Only Thomas remained, standing on the porch, watching the empty street. "You saw that," Elena said. "I saw it. He saved that kid." "He did." Elena shook her head. "I don't understand him." Thomas was quiet for a moment. "Some people build walls because they're hiding something. Some people build walls because they're protecting something." He looked at her. "Garrett Hale is both." "What does that mean?" "It means he's not finished yet. And neither are we." That night, Elena's phone buzzed. "Unknown number. I'm not the enemy you think I am. I'm also not the hero you saw today. But there's something you should know. Someone's been tampering with your file. And it wasn't me." "Gee." Elena read it 3 times. Then she walked to the porch, where Thomas was sitting in the dark, watching the stars. "We need to talk," she said. "I know. About everything." Thomas nodded slowly. "Then sit down," he said. "Because this is going to take a while."
Did that man just save a child, yell at a camera crew, refuse credit, and then text her a warning about file tampering? Because that is the most emotionally complicated thing I've seen since my second husband tried to apologize for cheating by building me a bookshelf. Poorly. Let's break this down. Garrett Hale, the man with the clipboard and the buyer contacts and the smile that could sell you a timeshare in a swamp, just risked his shoes, his bonus, and his whole smug performance to stomp out a fire and protect a kid he'd never met. That's not strategy. That's not manipulation. That's instinct. And instinct tells you who someone really is. Now, am I saying he's a good guy? No. He's been circling Elena like a shark for weeks. He's tried to intimidate her, isolate her, and buy her out. He works for a system that profits off people losing their homes. But here's the thing. He didn't have to save that kid. He didn't have to yell at the camera crew. He didn't have to refuse credit. And he definitely didn't have to text her afterward. I'm not the enemy you think I am. I'm also not the hero you saw today. That's not a man who's sure of himself anymore. That's a man whose walls are cracking. And Elena? She's standing on the other side of those cracks, watching, waiting, trying to figure out if what's behind them is worth trusting. I don't know if he's redeemable. I don't know if Thomas is telling the whole truth. I don't know who's been tampering with her file. But I know this, the game just changed. Next chapter, we find out what Thomas has been hiding. And Garrett makes a choice that could cost him everything. I'll see you there.
Start from the beginning. Elena sat across from Thomas at the kitchen table, 2 mugs of cold coffee between them. The folder he'd handed the assessor now spread open like evidence at a trial. Thomas looked at the papers, then at her. How far back do you want to go? Far enough to understand why a man who sleeps in a guest room with 1 bag has access to land trust documents and an $87,000 car. Thomas almost smiled. Almost. Fair enough. He picked up one of the documents, a faded certificate with an official seal. 15 years ago, I was a land use attorney, specialized in conservation easements, trust protections, hardship clauses. The boring stuff that keeps families from losing their homes to developers and tax schemes. You were a lawyer. I was a lot of things. He set the certificate down. Mesa Verde Land Trust was my project. We helped people like you. People with inherited properties, people who couldn't afford the legal fights, people who were being squeezed out by systems designed to make them fail. What happened? Thomas was quiet for a long moment. I trusted the wrong people. The story came out in pieces. A partner who'd been skimming funds. A board member who'd sold access to developers. A scandal that made the papers, destroyed the trust, and left Thomas holding a bag of blame that wasn't entirely his. I could have fought it, he said. Hired lawyers, gone to court, cleared my name. Why didn't you? Because by the time I realized what was happening, my wife was gone. Cancer. 8 months from diagnosis to the end. He looked at his hands. After that, I didn't care about my name. I didn't care about anything. Elena didn't say anything. She just waited. I walked away. Sold everything. Started moving. Sedona was supposed to be a stop, not a destination. He looked up. And then I saw your house. My house. I saw the tag on your gate. I saw the palm fronds. I saw the way you looked at the property, like it was a weight and a lifeline at the same time. He paused. I recognized that look. Elena felt something catch in her throat. So you decided to help me. I decided to see if you were worth helping. Some people just want to be rescued. You wanted to fight. He almost smiled. That's rare. The folder contained more than trust documents. There were inspection records, timestamp logs, a chain of emails between Garrett's company and the county assessor's office. Someone's been changing dates, Thomas said, pointing at a highlighted section. Your initial inspection was logged as 3 weeks earlier than it actually happened. That's how they justified the urgent timeline. Who would do that? Someone with access to the system. Someone who benefits from properties getting condemned fast. Elena stared at the papers. Garrett, that's what I thought at first. But look at this. Thomas pulled out another sheet, an internal memo from Hazard Compliance Solutions. Priority targets for Q4. Properties with inconsistent occupancy, elderly owners, or recent inheritance transfers. Fast-track candidates for investor acquisition. The memo was signed by someone named Richard Cahill. Garrett's boss, Thomas said. This isn't a one-man operation. It's a system, and Garrett's just the face they put on it. Elena sat back. So he's not the villain. He's a tool, whether he knows it or not. Oh, he knows. Elena thought about the text message. The warning. The way he'd looked after saving that kid. He knows exactly what he's part of. The question is whether he's willing to do anything about it. Garrett showed up at 7 o'clock. No truck this time. No clipboard. Just a man in jeans and a wrinkled shirt, standing at her gate like he wasn't sure he had the right to knock. Elena watched him from the window. "You going to let him in?" Thomas asked. "I'm deciding." He came alone. At night. Off the record. Thomas paused. That's not a man running a con. That's a man running out of options. Elena walked to the door. "I shouldn't be here." Garrett stood on her porch, hands in his pockets, looking at the ground like it might swallow him. "No," Elena said. "You shouldn't. If Cahill finds out I'm talking to you, then don't talk. Leave. Go back to your system and your buyer contacts and your priority targets." He looked up. "I can't." "Why not?" Garrett didn't answer right away. He just stood there, jaw tight, something shifting behind his eyes. "Because I pulled your file today. The full file. And I saw what they did. The timestamps. Not just the timestamps. There's a pattern. Properties like yours, inherited, single occupant, minor violations, they get flagged, pressured, and flipped. Cahill's been running this for years. Dozens of homes. Maybe hundreds." Elena felt cold. "And you didn't know?" "I knew something was wrong. I told myself it wasn't my problem." He shook his head. "I was good at that. Telling myself things." "What changed?" Garrett looked at her. Really looked at her, for the first time since they'd met. "You didn't break." They sat on the porch, Elena, Thomas, and Garrett, three people who had no reason to trust each other, trying to find a reason anyway. "Cahill's coming to the follow-up inspection," Garrett said. "He doesn't usually show up in person. That means he's nervous." "Nervous about what?" "About you. About the stewardship clause. About the fact that you passed the inspection and he can't figure out how." He looked at Thomas. "He doesn't know about the land trust angle." "Not yet. But he's digging." Thomas nodded. "Then we need to move faster than he can dig." "Move how?" "The hardship protection clause requires verified documentation, but it also requires proof of bad faith on the other side." Thomas pulled out his phone. "If we can show that Cahill's been manipulating files, falsifying timelines, targeting vulnerable properties, the clause doesn't just protect Elena. It locks the property permanently and triggers a state investigation." Garrett stared at him. "You want to take down my boss. I want to take down a system that preys on people who can't fight back. Your boss is just the name on the door." Garrett was quiet for a long moment. "If I help you, I lose my job." "Probably. I could lose more than that. Cahill has lawyers. Connections. Also probable. So why should I do this?" Thomas looked at him steadily. "Because you already know you're going to. You knew it when you saved that kid. You knew it when you texted her. You knew it when you drove here tonight." Garrett didn't deny it. Elena watched him. The way his shoulders dropped, the way his hands unclenched, the way something in his face shifted from resistance to resignation. "I have access to the internal server," he said finally. "Emails, memos, transaction records. If I download them, I can get you everything you need. And if you get caught, then I get caught." He looked at Elena. "But at least I'll know I did one thing that mattered." They worked until midnight. Garrett pulled files on his laptop while Thomas organized the documentation chain. Elena made more coffee, answered questions, and tried not to think about how surreal this all was. At one point, Garrett looked up from his screen. "You really do stargazing tours?" "Yes." "Like, for money?" "People pay to look at the sky. It's more interesting than it sounds." He almost smiled. "Maybe I should try it sometime." "You'd be terrible at it. You'd try to explain the liability issues of meteorites." "That's a real concern." "It's really not." Thomas glanced up from his papers. "If you two are finished flirting, I found something." Garrett's face went red. Elena pretended not to notice. The something was a pattern. 47 properties over 3 years. All flagged within weeks of inheritance transfers, or owner hospitalizations. All fast-tracked through the same inspection team. All sold to the same 3 investment groups within 90 days of condemnation. That's not coincidence, Thomas said. That's an operation. That's a federal case, Garrett muttered. If we can prove it. We can prove it. Thomas tapped the folder. But we need one more thing. What? We need to know who's been feeding Cahill his targets. Someone's giving him inside information, inheritance records, medical histories, occupancy data. That's not public. Someone's leaking it. Elena frowned. The county. Maybe. Or someone closer. Before anyone could respond, headlights swept across the front window. A car. Pulling into the driveway. Garrett went pale. That's Cahill's car.
Okay. I need everyone to understand what just happened. 3 people who should be enemies just spent 5 hours building a case together. A woman who almost lost her home. A homeless man who used to be a lawyer. And a code enforcement contractor who just committed career suicide at her kitchen table. That's not a team. That's a support group for people who've had enough. And Thomas, oh, Thomas. This man lost his wife, lost his career, lost everything, and he's been walking the desert for years like a ghost looking for a reason to stop. And then he saw Elena. He saw her fighting. And something in him woke up. That's not charity. That's recognition. But here's what's got me chewing my nails. Garrett Hale just downloaded evidence that could destroy his boss, his company, and probably his entire professional future. And he did it sitting on Elena's porch, drinking her coffee, making dumb jokes about meteorite liability. You'd be terrible at it. That's a real concern. It's really not. Baby. That's not banter. That's the beginning of something. That's 2 people who've been circling each other like wary cats finally sitting down in the same sunbeam. But now Cahill's in the driveway. And everything they've built tonight is about to get tested. I don't know if Garrett's going to hold. I don't know if Thomas's plan is going to work. I don't know if Elena's house is going to survive the next 24 hours. But I know this, that porch light is still on. And sometimes that's enough to start with. Final chapter next. Bring tissues. And maybe wine. See you there.
Nobody moved. Garrett was already closing his laptop, sliding it behind a stack of folders like a teenager hiding a diary. Thomas stayed perfectly still. Elena stood frozen by the coffee maker, her heart hammering so loud she was sure it could be heard from the driveway. The car door opened. Richard Cahill stepped out. He was shorter than Elena expected. Compact. Silver hair slicked back. A navy blazer that probably cost more than her telescope, and the kind of smile that looked borrowed from a campaign poster. He didn't knock. He just walked up the porch steps and stood at the screen door like he owned the place. Ms. Vega. His voice was smooth. Practiced. I hope I'm not interrupting. It's 10 o'clock at night. I'm aware. But I was in the area, and I thought, given the unusual circumstances surrounding your property, we should have a conversation. His eyes flicked to Thomas, then to Garrett. In private. Elena didn't move. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of them. Cahill's smile didn't waver, but something behind it cooled. Very well. He stepped inside without being invited. I'll be direct. The inspection you passed yesterday, it's being reviewed. There are concerns about the documentation, the stewardship arrangement, the timeline. The timeline your office manipulated? Cahill's smile flickered. I don't know what you've been told, Ms. Vega, but I assure you, I've been told that 47 properties have been flagged, fast-tracked, and flipped through your system in the last 3 years. Elena's voice was steady, calm, the voice of a woman who'd stopped being afraid somewhere around midnight. I've been told that you target inherited homes, single occupants, and people who can't afford to fight back. And I've been told that someone in the county has been feeding you information to make it all possible. Cahill was silent. Garrett stood up. She's telling the truth, he said. I pulled the files myself. Cahill turned to him slowly. The warmth was gone now. What was left was something cold. Something calculated. Garrett, I'm disappointed. I know. You understand what this means. For your career. Your future. I understand. And you're still standing here. Garrett didn't flinch. Yeah, I am. Cahill tried everything. He tried charm, offering to reconsider Elena's case, to drop the review, to make it all disappear. He tried threats, reminding Garrett of the non-disclosure agreements, the legal exposure, the professional ruin waiting on the other side of this decision. He tried confusion, questioning Thomas's credentials, the validity of the land trust documents, the chain of custody. But Thomas had answers for everything. Dates, signatures, cross-referenced filings that traced back 15 years. And then he produced the final piece. This is an affidavit, Thomas said, sliding a document across the table. Signed by the county clerk's office 3 hours ago. It confirms that 47 property files were accessed and modified using credentials linked to hazard compliance solutions. Your company, your system. Cahill stared at the paper. That's not possible. It's already been forwarded to the State Housing Authority and the Attorney General's office. Thomas paused. They'll be reaching out. Probably tomorrow. Cahill's face went pale. You can't. We can. We did. Elena stood up. And there's one more thing. She pulled out her phone and pressed play. Cahill's voice filled the room. Priority targets for Q4. Properties with inconsistent occupancy, elderly owners, or recent inheritance transfers. Fast-track candidates for investor acquisition. The recording was from the internal memo. Garrett had found the audio version buried in a company server backup. Cahill's own voice. His own words. Undeniable. You recorded yourself, Garrett said. I just found it. Cahill looked around the room. At Thomas, calm and unreadable. At Garrett, who wouldn't meet his eyes. At Elena, who stood in her father's kitchen with a phone in her hand and a steel in her spine he hadn't expected. This isn't over, he said. For you it is. Elena walked to the door and opened it. Get out of my house. Cahill left. He didn't say another word. The silence after his car pulled away was thick, heavy, the kind of silence that follows a storm. Elena sat down. Her hands were shaking. Did that just happen? That just happened, Thomas said. Is it over? The investigation will take months. But the hardship protection clause is locked. Your property is secure. Cahill's operation is exposed. He paused. It's over for you. Elena looked at Garrett. He was still standing by the table, staring at nothing, his jaw tight. You okay? No. He laughed, but it was hollow. I just torched my career. My references. My entire professional network. You did the right thing. Yeah. He finally looked at her. That's not usually how it feels. How does it feel? Terrifying. Empty. He paused. And maybe a little bit like relief. Elena walked over to him. Thank you. For what? For not being who I thought you were. Garrett's expression softened. Something vulnerable flickered behind his eyes. Something he'd been hiding behind clipboards and smiles and practiced charm. I'm still figuring out who I am, he said. But I think I want to be someone you can trust. That's a start. Is it enough? Elena didn't answer right away. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the man who'd tried to take her home, who'd saved a child without thinking, who'd risked everything for a woman he'd only known as a target. "It's a start," she said again. "That's all I can promise." "I'll take it." Thomas left the next morning. Not dramatically, not with fanfare, just a quiet goodbye on the porch, his bag over his shoulder, the early light turning the red rocks gold. "You're not staying?" "My work here is done." He smiled. "And I've got a few more stops to make. More houses to save, more people to check on. The trust is gone, but the work never really stops." Elena hugged him. She didn't plan to. It just happened. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me. Thank you for being worth seeing." He walked down the driveway, paused at the gate, and looked back. "Keep the porch light on," he said. "It matters more than you know." And then he was gone. The follow-up inspection happened 6 weeks later. Lieutenant Reyes conducted it personally. The property passed with no flags, no conditions, no concerns. The hardship protection clause was verified and locked. Elena's home was hers. Permanently. The state investigation into hazard compliance solutions made the news 3 months after that. Cahill was indicted on 12 counts of fraud, conspiracy, and abuse of public trust. The county clerk who'd been feeding him information was fired. 3 investment groups were sued. Garrett testified. He didn't ask for immunity. He didn't try to minimize his role. He stood in a courtroom and told the truth, even when it hurt. Elena watched from the gallery. When it was over, he found her outside. "You came." "I came." "You didn't have to." "I know." They stood there, the courthouse steps between them, the Arizona sun warm on their faces. "What now?" he asked. "I don't know. I've got a stargazing tour tonight. You could come." "I don't know anything about stars." "That's the point. You learn." Garrett looked at her, then at the sky, then back at her. "Okay." That night, Elena stood on her porch. The telescope was set up. The tripod was steady, thanks to Thomas. The sky was clear, and the first tourists were arriving, pointing at the red rocks and whispering about vortexes and energy lines. Garrett stood off to the side, awkward and out of place, trying not to touch anything expensive. "So what do I do?" "You look up." "That's it. That's it." He looked up. The stars were endless, bright and ancient and completely indifferent to everything happening below them. "It's beautiful," he said quietly. "Yeah, it is." Elena didn't look at the stars. She looked at him, at the man who'd tried to take everything from her and ended up giving her something she hadn't expected. A second chance. For both of them. Later, after the tourists left and the equipment was packed away, Elena sat on the porch alone. The folder was still inside. The documents, the evidence, the paper trail of a battle she'd never expected to fight. But she didn't think about that. She thought about her father. About the night he'd first pointed out Orion's belt. About the way he'd said, "Some things stay fixed, Elena, even when everything else is moving. Find those things. Hold on to them." She'd held on to this house. She'd held on to her stubbornness, her hope, her refusal to break. And somehow, against all odds, it had been enough. The porch light flickered. Elena looked at it. Then she got up, checked the bulb, tightened the connection, and watched it glow steady again. She left it on.
And there it is. That's the whole story. A woman inherits a house. A man with a clipboard tries to take it. A stranger behind a grocery store turns out to be a ghost with a law degree. And somehow, the good guys win. But here's what I want you to take away from this. It wasn't magic. It wasn't luck. It wasn't some miracle that swooped in at the last second. It was stubbornness. Elena Vega was told she was crazy. She was told she was gullible. She was told she was throwing her life away for a principle that nobody else cared about. And she did it anyway. She cleared the brush. She filed the paperwork. She let a stranger into her home because her gut said he was worth trusting. She stood on her porch at 2 in the morning and refused to let fear make her decisions. That's not a fairy tale. That's a choice. And Garrett? Oh, Garrett. That man walked into her life as a predator and walked out as something else entirely. Not a hero, he'd be the first to tell you that. But maybe something better. A person who finally chose to be honest. With her. With himself. With the system he'd been propping up for years. I'm still figuring out who I am. But I think I want to be someone you can trust. Baby, if that's not a love confession, I don't know what is. Now, do I think they're going to make it? Long term? Forever and ever? Honestly? I don't know. But I know this. He showed up to her stargazing tour. He looked up at the sky when she told him to. And he stayed. Sometimes that's all you can ask for. And Thomas, the man who walked away from everything and somehow found a reason to stop walking, he's out there somewhere. Fixing other people's hinges. Noticing things nobody else sees. Being the ghost that saves people who don't even know they need saving. Keep the porch light on. It matters more than you know. Yeah, it does. Because here's the truth, and I want you to hear me. Kindness is not a weakness. Stubbornness is not stupidity. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe rewards the people who refuse to stop fighting. Elena Vega gave her house to a homeless man. And he gave her back everything she didn't know she'd lost. That's the story. Now turn off your phone, go outside, and look up at the stars. You might be surprised what you find. I'll see you next time. Keep your porch light on.